Before we begin, let me ask you something. Have you ever experienced a moment so small, so ordinary, that you didn't realize it was shaping you until years later? Maybe it was a phrase someone repeated to you, maybe a routine you never questioned, maybe a gesture so simple you barely noticed it at the time. Today, I want to share a story built on one tiny ritual, something that happened quietly, consistently, and almost unnoticeably. A single dollar passed from one hand to another, day after day, not a fortune, not a reward, not a payment. Just a small, familiar ritual woven into everyday life. But what if I told you that this tiny act held life lessons powerful enough to echo across years? What if something so simple could teach love, consistency, gratitude, responsibility, and the kind of emotional wisdom that only reveals itself when you're finally ready to see it? This isn't just a story about money. It's a story about meaning, about how the smallest habits can become the greatest gifts, and how sometimes we only understand the truth long after the moment has passed. So stay with me, because by the end of this speech, you may find yourself looking at your own memories differently. You may realize that the quietest acts in your life were actually the ones shaping you the most. The idea that a daily gesture symbolizes love and consistency goes far deeper than the simple act itself. When someone does something small for another person every single day, it creates a pattern, an emotional rhythm, that becomes part of the relationship's foundation. In this case, the daily dollar isn't about financial value, it's about the message behind the repetition. A child might not fully understand it at first, but the subconscious impact is powerful. Every day, without fail, a moment of connection is created. That simple act becomes a reminder that someone is thinking about them. Someone cares enough to show up daily, and someone is willing to invest time and attention into nurturing their sense of security. Children interpret consistency as love. They don't measure affection by grand gestures or expensive gifts. They measure it through reliability. When the same act is repeated every day, it sends a message that the relationship is steady and dependable, and dependability makes a child feel grounded. The dollar becomes a symbol of emotional stability. It represents a promise that stays unbroken day after day, reinforcing trust and comfort. This consistency also builds emotional memory. As the child grows older, the act becomes a familiar touchstone, a piece of their daily life that feels safe and predictable. Humans remember emotional patterns more strongly than individual events, and this ritual forms part of the emotional blueprint the child carries into adulthood. There is also a deeply human aspect to repetition. It creates significance. Even the smallest actions, when done regularly, become meaningful traditions. They transform from simple gestures into emotional anchors. The dollar isn't remembered because it's money, it's remembered because it happened every day. Consistency turns ordinary moments into symbolic ones. It turns a dollar into a message. You are valued. You are thought of. You matter. For the one giving the gesture, it can also be a quiet way of expressing affection that words may not convey as easily. Not everyone expresses love verbally. Some express it through routine, reliability, and ritual. The daily act becomes their language of love. And for the granddaughter receiving it, the message becomes woven into her understanding of care, affection, and presence. Over time, this small repeated gesture becomes a lasting representation of devotion, forming a memory that remains long after the actual dollars are gone. A small daily act, like giving a dollar, can carry lessons that remain with someone long after the physical gesture ends. Children learn more from patterns than lectures. They absorb values through consistent behaviors they observe. When a child receives something small every day, it naturally sparks curiosity. They begin to wonder why it's happening, what it means, and what they should do with it. Even if no explanation is given at the time, the ritual itself becomes a quiet teacher. It introduces concepts like responsibility, gratitude, and awareness of value. A single dollar isn't much, but its repeated presence creates an opportunity for the child to think about how small things add up. It teaches the idea that growth doesn't always come from big leaps. Sometimes it comes from steady accumulation, patience, and thoughtful choices. Through this daily exchange, the child may begin to learn the difference between spending and saving, With a small amount, they have the freedom to choose without fear of making a huge mistake. If they spend it immediately, the natural consequence is that it's gone, and they begin to understand the cost of impulsiveness. If they save it, they witness the power of discipline and delayed gratification. These realizations don't require long explanations. The act of receiving something little and often is enough to build practical financial understanding. It also teaches gratitude. Repetition makes a child more aware that someone is taking time and effort to give something consistently. As they mature, they start recognizing the intention behind the act, which instills appreciation and respect for small efforts made by others. Beyond money, this daily gesture models generosity. When a child experiences steady giving, they internalize the idea that kindness doesn't need to be grand or dramatic. It can be simple, steady, and thoughtful. They learn that giving regularly, even in small amounts, can make a meaningful impact over time. This can influence their own habits, shaping them into someone who values consistency, thoughtfulness, and generosity. There is also a deeper emotional lesson. A child learns that love can be expressed quietly through actions rather than words. They begin to understand that care isn't always loud. Often it's gentle and subtle. That understanding becomes part of their emotional development, helping them recognize and appreciate genuine intention in others. Through a small daily gesture, values take root naturally, shaping character, mindset, and emotional awareness. A shared ritual, even one as small as handing over $1 each day, becomes a powerful thread that weaves two lives together. Routines like this create a rhythm that both people come to recognize and rely on. For the child, the act becomes a moment of connection that starts or ends the day with warmth and familiarity. It forms a tiny pocket of time where the world slows down, where attention is focused, and where presence feels intentional. These repeated moments, though brief, accumulate into something meaningful. They create a sense of us, a bond marked not by grand gestures, but by a pattern that belongs only to the two individuals involved. Rituals are one of the ways humans create emotional security. They take something ordinary and make it predictable, and predictability builds trust. When this exchange happens at the same time or in the same manner each day, it becomes more than an action. It becomes a shared experience. The child may begin to anticipate it, look forward to it, or even depend on it. The familiarity provides comfort, especially during times when other aspects of life may feel uncertain or changing. This daily routine becomes a constant, a quiet reminder that connection is steady, even as everything else shifts around them. Over time, the ritual turns into an emotional signal. The dollar itself may be small, but the moment it represents is big. It is a meeting point where affection and routine overlap. The child might associate that moment with feelings of safety, attention, and being cared for. Even without words, the ritual communicates a message of presence. I'm here, I'm thinking of you. This moment is ours. These simple exchanges create memories that are far richer than the act itself. As the child grows older, the ritual may also take on a deeper symbolic meaning. They might start to notice the consistency, the effort behind it, or the intention that has been quietly held day after day. This realization transforms the daily dollar into something much more significant. It becomes a token of relationship history. The act evolves from being merely routine to being a cherished tradition, one that holds emotional weight and nostalgic value. Rituals like this strengthen bonds because they anchor people to each other through time. They turn repeated gestures into emotional bridges, linking mornings, years, and generations with a simple, shared moment that is uniquely theirs. The idea that a small repeated gesture carries deeper emotional meaning reflects how people often communicate affection in subtle and symbolic ways. A daily dollar may appear simple on the surface, but actions like this are often rooted in personal history, memories, or experiences that shaped the giver long before the child ever came along. Sometimes people hold on to habits formed during difficult times, such as saving spare change because money was once scarce, or giving small amounts because that's all they had to offer when they were younger. When they pass this gesture on, it becomes more than money. It becomes a piece of their story quietly handed down. The daily dollar may mirror something they experienced in their own childhood, a tradition that once brought them comfort or stability, and now they want to share that same sense of reassurance with the next generation. This deeper meaning also reflects a desire to communicate love in a way that aligns with their personality and emotional style. Not everyone expresses affection through words or big displays. Some express it through simple, steady actions that speak without sound. Giving $1 may be their way of saying, "I care," "I'm here," or "I think about you," even if those phrases are never spoken aloud. The repetition adds emotional weight. A single dollar might be forgettable, but the daily ritual transforms it into a consistent reminder of love. The granddaughter may not grasp this immediately, but the meaning accumulates, growing clearer as she matures, and notices the intention behind the gesture. The dollar can also symbolize something more abstract, such as hope for the child's future or belief in their potential. It might represent encouragement to dream, save, plan, or build something meaningful over time. Each small bill becomes a subtle vote of confidence, a message of support folded into something tangible. And as these dollars add up, the emotional message becomes even stronger. Small efforts repeated patiently can create something meaningful. Over time, the granddaughter may begin to recognize that the gesture wasn't about the value of the dollar at all. It was about the giver's desire to leave a memory, a tradition, or a personal legacy. The meaning behind the ritual becomes clearer in hindsight when the physical dollars may be long gone, but the emotional significance remains. That's the power of simple, consistent acts. They turn everyday moments into lasting symbols of connection and love. The idea that small acts can leave a big legacy highlights how the simplest gestures often become the most memorable and influential parts of a person's life. When someone receives $1 every day, the dollar itself will eventually be spent, saved, or forgotten. But the feeling attached to the ritual lasts far longer. People tend to remember how they were treated, not the material value of what they were given. A small, thoughtful act done consistently becomes a marker in the heart, something that shapes how a person understands love, generosity, and connection. As the granddaughter grows older, she realizes that the daily dollar was never about accumulating wealth. It was about learning the power of small kindnesses and how deeply they can resonate. Small gestures are powerful because they fit easily into daily life. They don't require ceremony, preparation, or explanation. Because they are simple, they often happen more frequently, and frequency creates familiarity. This familiarity becomes emotional comfort, and comfort becomes memory. Over time, this transforms a tiny act into a significant emotional anchor. When the granddaughter looks back, she won't remember the exact number of dollars she received, but she will remember the pattern of care behind them. These moments become part of her personal narrative, shaping her understanding of affection and giving. Acts like this also teach that greatness doesn't always come from dramatic actions. Many people grow up believing that only big gestures matter, but this kind of ritual proves the opposite. It shows that steady love, expressed quietly and repeatedly, can leave a deeper impression than grand gifts given once in a lifetime. The granddaughter learns that meaningful impact often comes from consistency, not extravagance. This realization becomes one of the most lasting lessons she carries into adulthood. The legacy created by small daily gestures also extends beyond the original relationship. When a child experiences steady, gentle kindness, they often grow up wanting to recreate that same feeling for others. The granddaughter might one day start her own small rituals with people she loves. A note, a coin, a daily check, because she understands the emotional power behind simple actions. In this way, the original gesture continues to ripple outward, influencing future generations. This is how a small, everyday act becomes a legacy. It imprints values that last, memories that comfort, and lessons that guide choices later in life. Even long after the physical gesture stops, its emotional echo remains, proving that the smallest actions often carry the greatest meaning. The idea that the ritual eventually reveals a deeper purpose shows how meaning often becomes clear only with time and maturity. When a child receives something small every day, they usually accept it without questioning it. It becomes part of their routine, something that simply happens. Children don't analyze intention, they live in the moment. But as they grow older, their perspective shifts. They look back on past experiences with new understanding, and suddenly what once felt ordinary begins to make sense in a completely different way. The daily dollar, which once seemed like a simple habit, becomes a symbol of something much larger once the granddaughter reaches an age where she can reflect on it thoughtfully. This later realization often carries emotional weight. The granddaughter might think about how faithfully the gesture continued day after day, and she begins to consider what it must have taken to maintain that consistency. She recognizes the effort that went unnoticed when she was younger. That recognition deepens her appreciation and changes the meaning of the ritual. What seems small now feels significant. The intentionality behind the act becomes clearer. She understands that the daily gesture wasn't about giving money, it was about giving reassurance, creating connection, or passing down a quiet lesson. The deeper purpose was hidden in the consistency, waiting for the right moment in her life to be understood. Such realizations often happen during milestones or periods of reflection. Maybe she's older, managing her own responsibilities, and suddenly she thinks back to the small act she once took for granted. Maybe she becomes a parent or caretaker herself and understands how deliberate such a daily effort truly is. These moments illuminate the emotional architecture behind the ritual. What once appeared simple becomes layered with meaning, history, and intention. The unfolding understanding also shapes her identity. She might find herself adopting similar habits of care or recognizing the value of subtle kindness in a way she never did before. The realization becomes part of her emotional and moral foundation. The ritual teaches her, in hindsight, that love doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it reveals its true meaning gradually as life gives her the perspective to appreciate it. In this way, the daily dollar becomes a lifelong lesson that grows richer over time. The meaning isn't instantly obvious. It blooms slowly, becoming clearer as she evolves. What began as a routine ends as a revelation, proving that some of the most powerful lessons in life are understood only when the heart is ready to see them. In the end, the story of the daily dollar is not about money, but about meaning. It is about how the smallest gestures repeated with care can shape a lifetime. It shows how consistency builds connection, how simple acts carry hidden wisdom, and how love often expresses itself quietly through routine. What begins as a tiny moment becomes a lifelong lesson, teaching responsibility, gratitude, presence, and the emotional richness behind everyday rituals. As time passes, the purpose becomes clearer. The greatest gifts are often the simplest ones, and the deepest lessons are often hidden in ordinary moments that stay with us long after childhood has passed. This story reminds us that even the smallest act of kindness can become a legacy that lives on in the hearts of those who receive it. Thank you for taking the time to explore this story and the deeper meaning behind it. May your own journey be filled with meaningful moments, gentle lessons, and the kind of small, steady acts that leave lasting impact. Good luck with everything you create from this message, and thank you for choosing me to help you bring it to life.